Okay, we are live.
All right, everybody, we're going to wait about one more minute to allow other virtual guests to hop on, and then we'll get started promptly at around 12:05. Well, all right, everybody. Welcome to the Dallas Bar Association's public forum. This event is a fireside chat with Police Chief Garcia, our new police chief of Dallas. We're extremely excited to have him. Before that, he has informed us that he will be a couple of minutes late potentially, but we're going to go ahead and get started. The Dallas Bar Association's Public Forum Committee regularly hosts events and panels like this one to reach out to the community and continue to engage the Bar Association, not only with the legal issues that involve our general community, but also with information and events that enrich our Dallas community, as well as the community of attorneys that participate within it. Last month, we had a wonderful event surrounding the COVID vaccinations. Thank you to everybody who had the opportunity to attend that panel. It was very informative and symbolizes the type of information which is always enriching and always valuable that this committee likes to get out to its audience. Our next meeting is going to be on Wednesday, April the 7th at noon. Please check your calendars and look out for a calendar invite for that meeting for those of you all who are members of the Dallas Bar Association. Even if you are not a member of that committee, you are welcome to attend. We appreciate the voices and the input that attend those meetings. It really does allow us to plan programming like this one. We take all the grassroots ideas from people who come to those meetings, and we are able to target programs that allow people to have one-on-one conversations with people who have the ability to affect and impact the most intimate settings of our experience in the city, just like this event with Chief Garcia. There is also a committee meeting for one of the newest committees within Dallas Bar Association, which is the Dallas Allied Bar Standing Committee on Equity, which our moderator for this event, Coy, is a founding member of. You'll hear me say that again when I introduce Coy, but that committee has its meeting also on that same day on April 7th, but at 4:30. That's correct, Coy? So if you could mark your calendar for those two times on that date, again, that's April 7th, this coming Wednesday, from 12, which is noon, to 1 will be the DBA Public Forum Committee. And then the Dallas Allied Bar Standing Committee on Equity, or on Equality, sorry, will be meeting at 4:30 that same day. Both committees that could use your support and your input, that your support and your input goes a far way when you come and give it. So we appreciate that. Without further ado, it is my honor to introduce my friend, quite frankly, and I'm sure a friend to everyone who knows her, a wonderful individual. Her name is Coy Spurlock, who really needs no introduction because she has moderated so many of these events before. She is a 100% engaged giver in terms of her involvement in the community, and we appreciate her for it. As I said earlier, she is a founding member and co-chair of the Dallas Allied Bar Standing Committee on Equality. She also served as the immediate past president of the J.L. Turner Legal Association for last year, 2020. and is a past member of the Dallas Bar Association Board of Directors. This isn't on here, but her and I were also board members together on arguably the best organization in all of Dallas, which is the Dallas Association of Young Lawyers, DAYL. So I'll add that in there for her as well. She's a native of Gonzales, Louisiana. She received her BA from Southern University in Baton Rouge and her JD from the University of Tennessee College of Law. She also has a master's in government contracts and a certificate in project management from the George Washington University. I could literally go on for days about Coy, but I'm going to give you some of the highlights on some of her most recent accomplishment and achievements. She was recently awarded the Rising Raggio Award from the Dallas Women Lawyers Association, the 2021 Southern University Alumni Federation's 40 Under 40 recognition, and so many more. Her current practice areas are in state and federal procurement contracts, and she's currently at Lockheed Martin Corporation negotiating federal government contracts. So without further ado, I present to you Coy Spurlock, who will be moderating today's panel and who will introduce the new Police Chief Garcia.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Namdi. I really appreciate that. We are friends, so this is quite embarrassing for me every time I have to have one of my friends introduce me because, you know, they're there and they were in the trenches with me. But it is my pleasure to be able to moderate this event. We've been looking forward to this for a few months now. We're very excited to have a new chief. I was privileged enough to have served on one of the initial interview panels for the finalists. So when we were down to 11 candidates, I served on one of the panels who interviewed each of those candidates, and Chief Garcia was one of the standout candidates, obviously, because he was selected. And so I'm happy that this has come full circle, and now we get to learn a little bit more about him, and hopefully you all can see today what we saw in him when we were interviewing. Before we begin, and again, to give the chief some time to join, I would like to, myself and the bar actually would like to thank Ruben Ramirez, who's the current Deputy Chief of Police at the Dallas Police Department, who assisted us tremendously in setting up this event. Deputy Ramirez, we have anticipated hosting this for a long time, and he was very instrumental in making this happen. So we want to say thank you to you. Thank you for your work with the city of Dallas, and thank you for everything that you do in that regard. So I just want to check in. Is the chief ready? Have we gotten word?
Yes, he said he will be ready in about 5 to 10 minutes.
Okay, in 5 to 10 minutes. So what I will do, so that when he joins, we can just start the question portion of the event. I'm going to go ahead and introduce the chief for those of you who aren't familiar with him. So his name is Chief Edgardo Garcia, goes by Eddie Garcia. He is the 30th police chief of Dallas Police Department and is the first Latino to serve in this position in the department's 140-year history. Chief Garcia is 100% Puerto Rican. He was appointed in 2021 to command the 9th largest police department in the country, which is Dallas Police Department. He's originally from Puerto Rico, and his background has been the driving force that has helped light the path of possibilities between law enforcement and the community. Prior to his appointment as Dallas Police Chief, he served as the police chief for the San Jose Police Department in California. He was with the San Jose Police Department for his entire 29-year career. He joined that department as an officer in February of 1992. He's worked in patrol, narcotics, and special operations, serving on the MERGE program, the Mobile Emergency Response Group and Equipment. He also served as a patrol sergeant, night detective, and homicide investigator. He was promoted to captain and then deputy chief, and in late 2013, he was named assistant chief, and in 2016 was appointed chief of police. Chief Garcia earned a Bachelor of Science in Criminal Justice Management from Union Institute and University. He also attended the De Anza College in Cupertino, California, where he studied administration of justice. Among his programming successes, the San Jose Police Department implemented basic Spanish in the Police Academy, Read to Succeed program, and launched a Spanish language Facebook page and significantly increased their minority recruiting efforts. Chief Garcia, who is bilingual in English and Spanish, places tremendous value on public safety and community engagement with the understanding that it's a shared responsibility and the police cannot do it alone. And it looks like the chief is joining us just in time. Hi.
Hi, how are you guys? Hi, how are you?
How are you?
I'm doing all right, doing all right. Sorry I was late. I was meeting with the boss.
That's okay. We all have bosses. You got to do what you got to do, right?
Yes, yes,
Yes.
ma'am.
So welcome. I've already kind of introduced you a little bit, gave him some of your background. So we're gonna hop right into the question portion. Can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself? What are some fun things you'd like for us to know about you?
Oh, some fun things to know about me. All right. Well, I know it's been made many times, but you can see in the back of my office here, the rug that's on the floor. Probably since I was born in Puerto Rico. I moved to California when I was young, and I was a Dallas Cowboy fan in the mid 70s before I learned how to speak English. I was a Cowboy fan. So, that's one part about me that if anyone goes to these home games, I'm sure at every home game to watch my Cowboys play. I'm a big Peloton rider. I get up every morning at 5, get my workout in. I like staying busy, staying active. I love being out. I love having a good time. I like to tell people I'm just a normal guy. Enjoy doing everything everybody else enjoys doing. So I try to balance as best I can to ensure that I'm working hard, but at the same time taking care of myself.
Well, that's good to hear. We love a fit chief. I'm sorry that you're a Cowboys fan. As a Louisiana native, I can't agree, but it's all right.
I thought I'd be coming to more friendly territory here. I swear. I mean, coming from the Bay Area, I had to fight the Niner fans. Now I'm in Texas and I got to fight y'all. I mean, my goodness. Okay, we're gonna have to have some good friendly side wagers during the season.
I agree. So Dallas is approximately 41% Hispanic. And as you said, you're Puerto Rican, 100% Puerto Rican, and that makes you the first person of Hispanic descent to serve as chief in Dallas. Does this hold any cultural significance for you or your family?
Oh, that's a great question. I say, well, yeah, it's a sense of pride for me. I'll be honest with you, to be able to have come from Puerto Rico as a young child, with a family who struggled both financially and learning the language and the culture and things of that nature. In California, learning how to speak the language. There was a story that I told when I was promoted to chief in 2016 of the San Jose Police Department. And, my mom had went to go ask some teachers, how myself and my sister were doing when we were in school as young kids. We didn't speak very good English. And so the teacher said to my mom, well, you know what, they'll never be at the top of their class, but they'll be okay. They'll do okay. And I'll never forget in 2016 telling my mom, hey, Mom, I think we made it to the top of the class.
Yeah.
To me, it's a sense of pride only when the chips are against you. To be able to come up and about it is huge and significant to me. And one of the dynamics I've heard from other great leaders before is that our job isn't over, right? For being the first Latino chief, it's when we get there, our job is to open the door for the next person and to ensure people are prepared. That's not to say that we're going to give things away. It's to prepare people for the roles and the jobs. And so it's significant to me just because as I went to go speak at San Juan Diego, the first week I got here and I spoke, I gave a Spanish message to the congregation. I said it then, I go, maybe there's a young child out there that doesn't speak the language yet that someday could stand here as the chief of police of the Dallas Police Department. And so that's significant to me. And so I'm everyone's chief, but at the same time, I recognize the responsibility and I recognize the perspective that our Latino community has to be the first Latino chief. And I wear that very proudly.
Cultural representation is very important, very significant, and I'm sure you will do what you can to reach back. And I'm glad to hear you say that. That's important to me as well, to make sure that we're reaching back to pull up people who are coming behind us and to set the example to let them know that it's possible that you can do the things that you want to do. So I hope shout out to your teacher for doubting you. I hope she sees you now.
Right.
Yeah. So you've been in your new role as the chief for about a month and a half. How is it so far? Can you tell us some of the things you wanted to tackle day one?
Yeah, it's been busy. Obviously, what the first 6 weeks that I was here, we had, obviously I had 5 officers that were shot at going to calls for service. I had 2 officers that were hit, luckily not life threatening. I had an officer killed in the line of duty. I had another officer die on his way into work. I had to arrest an officer for some egregious acts, all in the first 5 weeks. There's not a major city chief in America that's not going to tell you that they're going to have to, at some point, unfortunately, deal with all those things. I just didn't think I'd have to deal with them in the first 5 weeks. But you tackle those issues, based on, what I've done in the past and some of those things. But one of the things that I wanted to tackle right when I got on is people would ask me, how am I going to know the city of Dallas? How am I going to get to know the community? And there is no easy way. And so things that I've done is gone out to meet our community, to go to each individual station, to speak to, although we're one large city, it's almost at times that there's 7 smaller cities within our city, all with their different perspectives and priorities. And so meeting the community was incredibly important. Driving around and talking to people was incredibly important. Meeting the rank and file was incredibly important. Those are things that I wanted to do because I don't come into this job naive about what I need to tackle and what as a police department we need to accomplish, and we need to reduce violent crime here. There's no secret to that. But what I will say is we can come up with any operational plan in the world, and we've come up, I believe, with a good one. But if the men and women who are doing the jobs don't believe in what the plan is or don't believe in you, we can come up with the best plan in the world and it'll mean nothing. It'll just be a piece of paper. And so one of the things that I've tried to do is really go out there and meet the rank and file, whether it's going to the stations, having discussions with them, meeting with detectives, going out on patrol. I'll probably go out on patrol again at the end of this week because I think it's important for the rank and file to know, for the men and women to know that I got their back. We're going to hold ourselves accountable when we're wrong, and that's a promise. But when we're right, I'm going to have their back. They need to know that they're going to feel supported because the jobs that we have to do in order to turn this ship around, it rests on their backs, not on mine, on theirs. And so, and I know their importance, and it's important for me to get out there. So I think I'm beginning to accomplish that, but there's more work to be done.
I like to hear it. I like to hear it. So, and again, you spoke on this as well. As a newcomer to Dallas and an outside candidate, you're working with officers, some of whom were in competition for your position. What are some strategies you have for coalition building and establishing cohesiveness?
Well, first things first, and I've said this before, my goal is that when I leave here, that the next chief of the Dallas Police Department comes from inside these walls. That's my goal. And it's not as simple as just saying that, because as I've said to the staff, if we're able to do that, then we've done 3 major things. We've increased department morale, we've reduced violent crime, and we've increased community trust. And so to say that hopefully the next police chief comes from this administration is not just an overly simplistic term. There's a lot of good things that have to happen in order for that to happen. And so my success is their success. Their success is our collective success. I'm not in this. I don't have an agenda. I'm only doing this job so that I can look in the mirror at the end of the day and do the best I could for my community, for the rank and file. I'm not trying to run for office or do other things after this. I'm just trying to do the best job I can as police chief. I want to bring people around me as I've already promoted certain people that were in the running to become chief. I'm not, it doesn't bother me in the least bit. As a matter of fact, I'd be naive not to bring those type of people around me, particularly as well as they did in the process. And so, again, bringing all our strengths together collectively and ensuring that our staff, my people know that I mean it, is a way to build cohesiveness. And I have felt it, and so I think obviously when I say to people, hey, when I leave here, the next chief needs to come from here. I think those are the things, if they're really meant and heartfelt, that, I'd like to think if I was that individual, if I was in the running and a chief said that to me, that's like, oh, let's get after it then. Let's get after it, boss. And let's do the best we can for the city of Dallas. And then, you know what, maybe my time comes later on, but I'm going to work hard for the goals that we have now, because again, our collective goals are to make the next person successful. And so I think that's built some cohesiveness and we got to keep going with it.
I agree. In your recruitment efforts, and this is a big topic for everyone, right? Mental health. So in your recruitment efforts, What measures and trainings are being implemented to adequately determine the mental fitness of police officer candidates? And is there a retroactive effort being implemented to evaluate the mental fitness of current officers?
That's a great question we get all the time. And I'll tell you, it's so incredibly important. I'll tell you, we go through a battery of tests to become police officers. It's not just immune to Dallas, but anywhere else in the country with regards to background process, psychological battery testing, not that just testing itself, but the polygraph test, the talking to the psychiatrists and talking to, and all of that pales in comparison at times to even just talking to people that know you, looking at, social media, looking at a lot of things. So, we go through these battery of tests, and then later on, once we get on, we don't do it as often as we probably should. Obviously, those are things that are going to have to be legislated at some point. There's a lot of HIPAA laws. There's a lot of privacy laws and things that go, as y'all well know, with regards to when we can and can't. And so, so we need to ensure that we need to be proactive. And some of the things that we're trying to do is, in that proactivity, is a couple of things. Number one, what we're doing once they're on is trying to be more proactive with our psych services. And to, this job, it's sometimes hard for someone to ask for help. And we need to be proactive in that vein. Right? If there's areas that we can come out and talk to details and talk to officers to let them know what the resources are, where they can go ask for help, whether they want to or not, giving them contacts of where they can call for help, whether it's alcohol abuse, whether it's, family issues that they're having, if depression, things of that nature, know that they're not alone. I think that goes a long way because we know that a lot of these things go underreported, particularly in this line of work. The other dynamic that we're working on as well is trying to get an early warning system. We've actually partnered and we're working on with benchmark analytics right now to look at ways where there's some things that could be red flags that we can bring officers in to have conversations with them before they go down the wrong path. And so we know we're in contract with benchmark now. We're actually finalizing what the tool will look like, where the algorithms will come from, so that we're able to spot officers well before they go down a wrong path if they're going to. I'll say this, and in light of everything that's occurred, we hire from the human race. We have individuals that are working here. We have individuals that are working in other law enforcement agencies across the country that should not be here because we hire from the human race. And our job is, once we find those individuals that don't deserve to wear this uniform, is that we need to take proper action. Having said that, we absolutely need to strengthen our hiring protocols. We need to strengthen that battery of testing that I mentioned before coming in. And we need to bring the experts on and go even further into that. We need to use the data of individuals that have been terminated or the individuals that have gotten into trouble in a police department. Look at how they tested when they came in. And then perhaps those are some red flags that we need to look at when we're bringing others in. I'm not saying that would preclude someone. I'm just simply saying that if we look through the last 5 years and saw and picked 10 officers that were terminated or got significant discipline, let's take a look. Did they have similarities in their evaluations upon their hiring? And if they did, what were they? And then let's apply them to new recruits to see if we need to dig deeper. Again, not to say they wouldn't get in, but we need to dig deeper perhaps. By the same realm though, because I'm always a carrot and the stick guy, let's find the 50 best officers we have in this police department, the ones that give to their community, the ones that are taking the criminal element off the street, the ones that are rightfully just, and let's see what things they have in common. And let's plug that in. We do too much on the front end to not take advantage of things that we will know on the back end. And I think those are some things that we need to move forward.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. It's a wonderful approach. Using the data that you have to make determinations for how you move forward is, it's so common sense, but it's not, you don't think about it. Everyone's being reactive instead of proactive. So bravo to you for even giving that some thought. So lack of experience in appropriately identifying and addressing mental health issues has contributed to the mishandling of the detainment and arrest of individuals with mental health and displacement concerns. Are there trainings required for officers to better understand and apply de-escalation tactics in these instances?
Well, there's two different issues that I'll relate. Number one is, yes, we go through de-escalation training. Obviously, and officers do go through crisis intervention training and things of that nature. But the dynamic with dealing with the mentally ill, and I'll say this all the time, and I don't know if the police chief will disagree with me to say that we do too much when it comes to mental illness. We are not the experts. We need more help. I can train an officer all I want. They're still not going to be a clinician. They may help us on the front end a little bit, but we need more help. We need to not only with the instances that we hear that may have dealt with force having to be used, but on instances where it doesn't raise to force. But what do we do with an individual? What services are provided? Or do we just shoo them along and tell them to go somewhere else? Or do we honestly have an end game where we can bring someone to help, some help? Now, those are questions that I have. Those are questions that we need to do as societal, and those aren't police issues. But I will tell you, one of the things that we're doing here is the expansion of our right care program. Our right care program to me is a model that we can utilize where it's a clinician, it's a EMT firefighter, and it's a police officer that are going out and dealing with these issues. And obviously, we would all like the police officer to only have to be there if needed, and to let the clinician and the EMT deal with those issues until they're absolutely needed. And so those are areas, those are trainings that we do the trainings. But again, what I want to highlight the most is that these programs are programs that we need to invest in, that we know will keep our community safer. And listen, our officers do not want to use force. And particularly, they don't want to use force on individuals who are going through mental crisis. And so we need to do the best we can to absolutely de-escalate that situation before it turns into a forced confrontation.
Yes. And I used to work at Parkland Hospital, so I'm very familiar with the Right Care program, and I've seen it in action. I do think we need to do more to invest in that program, but it can be effective if done right. So I'm glad that you brought light to that. I know a lot of people aren't familiar with it. So I'm going to dig a little bit deeper. And I told everyone before you hopped on that I had the privilege of being on one of the interview panels when you were a final candidate for the position. And I was very impressed with the way that you answered a particular question. And so I want to ask you this question again and allow you a chance to show everyone and speak about what you spoke about with us. So we want policing in Dallas that is fair, professional, and treats everyone with dignity, and is effective in reducing crime and making the city a safer place for all the people of Dallas. The history of policing in the United States has frequently not lived up to this expectation. Please tell us your understanding of the history of policing in the United States and what you believe is necessary to achieve ideal equity in policing tactics.
I'm passionate about this subject because it's one of these things that came to me a few years ago. Sometimes sitting on my couch on a Friday afternoon when I watched the Netflix movie The 13th. And when I saw the movie The 13th, what dawned on me, and there's some things in The 13th that were opine, that was opinion, and some things I agreed with and some things that I didn't. But what I couldn't disagree with the historical perspectives that I heard in that movie. So it dawned on me that when I was a 21-year-old, I started applied to the San Jose Police Department 1991. It started in 1992. And that date will be of significance as we continue the story later on with a little bit more. But the one thing that dawned on me is as a 21-year-old, I would go out of the academy and I would patrol one of our areas of our city, large city in San Jose, over 1 million people. And it would be our communities of color, where I'd be greeted with what I felt was disrespect. Why are you harassing us? Expletive here, expletive that. And I do my job and then leave. And then there were other areas of the city where that were more affluent areas that weren't necessarily communities of color, that it was yes, sir, no, sir, how can I help you, sir? And so as a young 21-year-old cop, how do you drive off of those situations? When we talk about implicit bias and what it is, we need to do more for that, because there's nothing other than gaining some implicit bias that you would gain from those opportunities as a human being. And so one of the things that I wanted to do really is, and I think in answer to your question, is we need to understand where we come from. We understand that this badge that I wear so proudly today didn't always shine so brightly, and still to this day at times doesn't shine brightly. And we need to understand that, and we need to embrace that. And so we teamed up with one of our local institutions. And it's interesting because if you read the 24th Century Policing President Obama's task force on 21st century policing, it does talk quite a bit about teaming up with institutions to do training with officers and do things of that nature. And so we teamed up and we came up with a historical history lesson that all of the recruits in the city of San Jose go through. And as a matter of fact, this afternoon, I have a meeting with BJ Wagner to have a discussion about how we can move that forward to the academies here in Dallas. That really goes through the negative history of American law enforcement, and particularly on our communities of color. Where in San Jose, we covered where people that were slave catchers had slave catchers on their badges. We started there. We would go through the historical perspectives. We bring community members to have these discussions so that at the end of the day, we get a better understanding as to why you may walk into be in some neighborhoods and you're not treated, people are not going to stand at attention for you because that respect doesn't exist, that you have to work for it. You know, it's one of these dynamics as we have our, our individuals graduating the academy class, where they step from going into an academy class to going to our areas of need and concern that also happen to be, impacted by socioeconomic factors and our communities of color, where it could be the first time that a 21-year-old police officer has that interaction. And we need to do more on that front end to give our recruits a better understanding as to what it is. And so, knowing where we're from, knowing the original sin that we're born in this job is extremely helpful. There's another good Netflix movie. It's called LA 92. And with LA 92, it talks about the Rodney King riots, Rodney King in 91, but the riots in 92. And was particular for me, it was because, again, I started in 92. And so I was a 21-year-old police officer when that was going on. And what's interesting about a lot of these stories, and even interesting most about what we see on nationally, is we really focus on the actual incident, which we should, because incidents have been awful. But what we lose sight of at times, Ferguson, Missouri being one, if we read the after action report, are the years of systemic inequality that the issue that occurred was just the final straw. Yep. And so we really need to do, and again, the old adage, if we don't learn from history, we're doomed to repeat it. And so to the extent that we can, we really have to look at where we're at. Now, you'll never meet a chief of police that wants to take the criminal element off the street more than I do. You will not. Our communities need us. We can't allow our individuals to be suffering from violent crime and murder. But you also won't meet a police chief that truly feels that we need to give back to the community as well. One of the mottos that we have here is weed and seed. We're going to weed the criminal element off our streets, and then we want to seed it with positivity. And we need to do that. Long-term solutions as well, where we're not going to arrest our way out of things. But as it comes to equity, we need to just get that understanding that our communities want us, but they want us to be fair and just. And I think you disarm, and I don't mean disarm people in that they don't have a righteous reason to distrust us. I mean, but you come into a conversation, because it's happened to me about this, and you immediately recognize that, hey, we've made a lot of mistakes. There are systemic years of mistakes that we've made that we need to live up to, and that we need to own up to. And so that at times then gets people to start listening, because again, it's like anything else. Unless you're willing to admit your mistakes, it's difficult to start the conversation. So we need to admit our mistakes so that we can start building on a solid foundation.
Yeah. Ownership in these situations is so important. Accountability, recognizing the history, and then doing what's necessary to change that. So, I really wanted you to speak on that again. When we interviewed you, we were very impressed by your thought process and your approach to this. So thank you for that. And we did bring up implicit bias. So for the audience, implicit bias is defined as bias that results from the tendency to process information based on unconscious associations of feelings, even when these are contrary to one's own conscious or declared beliefs. Implicit bias plays a significant role in our justice system and how individuals of varying races, ethnicities, genders, religions, and socioeconomic backgrounds are perceived and treated. What is your approach to addressing implicit bias in procedural justice?
Well, a couple of things. Number one is the awareness. I mean, one of the things, again, that we're starting here is to introduce, we're not introducing, but to continue implicit bias procedural justice training. And they're two separate terms. into our academy classes. And one of the dynamics that we're going to utilize there. Now, implicit bias, one of the interesting things about implicit bias is that every human being has a bias. It has bias. Every human being does. And the quicker that we could all recognize that at times that it's not taboo to say that implicit bias exists, because it does. We hire from the human race. The importance and significance of implicit bias, particularly as we speak to our officers, is the fact that you cannot act on those biases. You need to recognize, and the quicker you understand and recognize, instead of trying to sweep things under the carpet, as soon as you can recognize implicit bias and deal with that and have conversations about that, the quicker you could recognize that, you know what, I can't act on that. And so that, recognizing that we as human beings all have our own biases is imperative. It's actually the cornerstone of making something like that stick. Dr. Jennifer Eberhardt, who is a renowned professor from Stanford University and one of the experts on procedural justice. The other dynamic is diversity in a workforce. Diversity in a workforce is one of the ways to reduce implicit bias within a workforce. And that's not just law enforcement, because we talk about implicit bias and specific to law enforcement. Implicit bias exists in everywhere. And so those are things, as we look, that we don't, oftentimes in law enforcement, we put ourselves in this little corner. I mean, we're human beings and we're like anything else. And so we need to recognize those factors that can reduce implicit bias. Excuse me. So it's important to recognize those things. When it comes to procedural justice, the dynamic in procedural justice really is a couple of things. Number one, we need to treat people like we would like to be treated. I mean, when we talk about procedural justice, and we put these fancy names on all these projects, when at the end of the day, we need to treat people in the manner in which we would like to be treated. I always say this comment before, and I didn't make it up, but I'll say this: when we're dealing with a suspect, we don't treat the suspect professionally because they're professional. We treat the suspect professionally because we're professional. We want to be that individual. We want to be that police department that almost like the fanciest butcher shop in Dallas, where we know it's busy and it's packed, but as soon as you get to the counter, the attendant treats you like you're the only person in the store, so that you have a voice, that you make people feel better. And so again, procedural justice isn't necessarily in terms of one individual race, ethnicity, or it's about just treating people better, treating people the manner in which you would like to be treated. Where at times, we need to understand also, when people call us, they're generally not calling us to say, "Hey, hope you guys have a great day. How about them Cowboys?" That's not what they're doing. I mean, they're calling us in their moments of crisis, when they're having their worst possible time. Now, granted, we're human beings as well. We could have been going from call to call to call, where we've had to deal with atrocities that no one would want to deal with. We have to take deep breaths, and procedural justice allows us a little bit to recognize that, it's not wrong to necessarily, to feel stressed, but take a second to understand the other person, to have empathy and understand where they're coming from, and try to be bigger than that. And so those are things, and they're two different dynamics, but those are things that we're definitely going to be bringing into the department, and things that are important. And when we talk about procedural justice, and really, although again, it's couched in this name, and obviously with law enforcement, they're different, but it should be no different than any other profession, treating its clients, our community, who are our clients, with respect and empathy.
Agree 100%. So historically, the single greatest barrier to effective internal investigation and adjudication of citizen complaints is the police unwritten code of silence. In your previous role, what were some strategies that were effective for encouraging police officers to report misconduct or unethical behaviors and excessive use of force? And as the Dallas chief, what will you track to gauge whether you have a culture of accountability and transparency when addressing internal infractions?
Well, some of the things that we did at my old department is just setting policy with regards to mandatory reporting of incidents and things that had occurred. And then also holding supervisors accountable. It's difficult to track necessarily those type of things. Obviously, here in Dallas, we're going to be doing the same thing with regards to that. I mean, we have to hold our supervisors accountable as well. We need to ensure that we don't have, the corruption of noble cause that seeps through large agencies if we don't have the infrastructure to support it, meaning supervision. And so, obviously, when ensuring that we have that culture really is going to come down from the supervision aspect and the investigations that we have with regards to, who else knew about it, who else was on scene. With the advent of body worn camera is actually going to help as well. When we have incidents, we're going to be able to ask the question that we didn't used to. Back in 1992 when I started, if an officer used force and I was there, it's our word against the individual's word or what have you, and there is nobody that's going to be there to ask the question. Well, why didn't you intervene? Why didn't you stop? Mm-hmm. Like now with the advent of body worn cameras and as other media comes available on these type of incidents, we're able to ask that question now. And so, we'll be able to gauge as to whether or not, okay, did you stop it? Did you do something about it? Did you report it or did you not? And so we're able to ask those questions now. But I tell you, there is no silver bullet. There's no panacea to trying to figure out exactly the culture of the silence other than setting an example from up top. And unfortunately, at times, no chief wants to discipline somebody. No chief wants to have to fire someone. So when we do that, it's going to be meaningful. You do discipline here to correct behavior, and sometimes the behavior is so atrocious that it doesn't matter if you can correct behavior, but the other prong that has to be met is setting a standard for the organization. So again, my belief is it's not so much as to what happened as we hire from the human race, and we're taking steps in policy to help us reduce that. It's what you do once you find someone having done wrong. And that's just not the individual that's used force, it's the individual that allowed it. And so as those things come up, those are things that we'll definitely scrutinize, and those are ways that will help reduce it. But again, it is not an easy task. And I'm sure every police chief in America would tell you the same thing.
Great. And this is going to be a little bit, I think, of a personal question for you, but not something that you aren't familiar with for sure. So following George Floyd's murder last summer, there was some heavy police presence described by many as militarized during the peaceful demonstrations. And you faced some harsh criticism and some backlash regarding your officers in San Jose's use of excessive force, use of rubber bullets, tear gas on peaceful and nonviolent protesters. Do you believe that there were some missteps taken in your department's approach? And what were some responsive measures that you took to quell the tension?
Yeah, that's a great question. We all made mistakes. There's things that we could have done better. There's no question about it. I'll tell you, in the 30 years that I've been in the San Jose Police Department, we've handled a lot of protests. We've handled situations that turned violent at times. Never in my 30 years did I see the violence that I saw that transpired in San Jose. I'll speak to what happened there, but I'm certain that there's some other large cities that would say the same. I know anecdotally I've heard the same thing here. And so what I'll say with that is I wish that it was all peaceful. There are videos and vignettes of peaceful protests and demonstrations that we wholeheartedly support. And as well as the fact that the old adage of no one hates a bad cop more than a good cop. Law enforcement nationally was appalled as to what happened in Minneapolis. But again, the protests weren't all peaceful. And as the protests and more so was the individuals that were agitators in the crowd. And that was probably the most. And some of the things that our tactics had to change. There's no question about it. Listen, our goals stay the same. Our goal is to ensure that our residents are safe. That includes the people that are peacefully that are protesting. Our goals are to keep our city safe. And the goals were to make sure that our officers were safe. Now, those goals should never change. The tactics have to tweak. We changed our tactics as we really just had the force the first couple of days, which was kind of similar to a lot of other cities. But we changed our tactics as to when we could use less lethal, the announcements that we make, the educational perspective that we have to go out with our community to talk to them about. And then we need to stand up. The point is to fix relationships is not too dissimilar to what I mentioned about the history in policing, where we need to say we could have done things better. These were unprecedented times and we could have done things better. But you know what, there's an old adage where, you make mistakes, but you learn. you're either successful or you learn. We learned a lot. I know nationally we learned a lot. I know personally we learned a lot. That again, our goals are not going to change. We will keep the city of Dallas safe. We will keep our officers safe. We will keep our community safe. But the tactics that we will use, we'll have to tweak. And so, yes, I don't think there's a major city chief that wasn't faced with criticism. Some of it warranted. There's no question about it. But the dynamic that also needs is that unfortunately, not every demonstration was peaceful, with agitators taking on the police. I mean, that's a reality of it. That's not to say we did everything right, because we didn't. There's things we could have done much better. And hopefully we've all learned from those.
Okay, and finally, one of the cited retention issues for the Dallas Police Department is salary offerings. Do you feel like the current pay for new officers is competitive enough to grow the force as much as you need and attract the talent that you'd like to have?
Well, you know what, I'm going to try to be, I don't want to try to be, to skirt the issue too much. But what I'll say, listen, I think officers, because we had the same issues in San Jose. One of the dynamics in San Jose is we had a big pension issue in San Jose, and then we had a big compensation issue in San Jose that led to a mass exodus of officers. Ultimately, in the end, what the officers wanted there, which I'm sure the officers wanted here, is just want fair compensation. And that's what we need to strive for. There's dynamics of a big city. I always wanted to work for a big city, whether as an officer, and here and so there's a dynamic to a big city that we know coming to a big city that you may not get the same pay that you may get at a smaller city. There's other reasons why you come to a big city. So it's important to look at big cities and how you compare to that, right? So I'd say the answer for us would be not to compare ourselves necessarily to smaller agencies, but okay, how do we compare with Austin? How do we compare with Houston? How do we compare with San Antonio? Let's see where we compare there, right? And then work from that. I'll tell you, we're not having issues with recruiting. If there's any issues with recruiting that we're having is based primarily on COVID. One, because we've not been able to get out there as much as we'd like to. And then the sizes of our academy classes have had to be a lot smaller. But ultimately, people still want to be DPD officers, and that's fantastic. I can't wait. I'm going out to a couple schools to take part in the PTech program in Dallas because, what we want to ensure, our number one priority in recruiting is to ensure that the individuals that are from Dallas want to become Dallas police officers. So that's something that we're going to continue to do. But also, it's not just about having 40, 50, 60 people in a class. Those 40, 50, 60 people have to be the right people. I would rather have 40 people that look different than 60 people that look the same. We need to ensure that as we're going in that we don't forget that we need to do our best to mirror the community that we serve. And so pay is certainly an issue. It's something that we can never lose sight of just from being competitive. Coming from a large city before, we weren't going to compete with some of the smaller cities around us, but we can compete with some of the big ones. And so as long as the officers, are compensated fairly, I think we're not going to have an issue, and we hope to grow the department. We want to continue growing the department, and I have no doubt that we're going to do that.
I look forward to seeing the department grow in a positive way as well. We're happy to have you here. So I'm out of questions for you. Did you have any for me? Is there anything you wanted to leave with?
No, not at all. I enjoy these conversations, and it's interesting. When we have these questions, the only way to move forward is by having difficult conversations. So I love, I love the conversations, particularly when I'm into my neighborhoods, talking about the issues around race and policing. We need to get out there. One of the things I cannot wait for COVID for us to be past this, so we can get back to just knowing each other, and not via necessarily through a computer screen, but just breaking bread, sitting around a table with each other, having conversations, humanizing each other. That's a big missing piece in this. We don't need science. It's a matter of just getting out there and meeting the community and talking to them and letting them see you that, I'm more than just this uniform. And we've lost that during this pandemic. That's to me, man, that's one of the most important things that I can't wait to get back to.
Yeah, I think we all look forward to getting back to normal, or whatever our new normal is going to look like, right?
The new normal, right?
Yeah. So I just want to thank you so much for your time. I know that you're busy. I know that we are keeping you on your toes in Dallas, but it seems like you're ready to rise to the occasion. So we're happy to have you here. And if you need us, me personally, the Dallas Bar, we're here. And so just thank you so much again for the time. Thank you for the audience for tuning in, and just have a great day. And we look forward to seeing you around the city.
You'll see me around the city, and I tell you what, regardless what you throw at me, man, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. I'm enjoying it. I love it here. Like I said, I would have moved here anyway, whether I got this job or I retired. You would have had me. You would have had me anyway. So I'm happy to be here. Wouldn't want to be anywhere else. And God bless y'all.
God bless you. We'll see you football season.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. All
Bye-bye.
right. Bye-bye.